Hi, how are you?
Fine, and you? Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Oh my God, I was watching this link that you posted in your Facebook page, the last work that you did.
Oh yeah,
So good.
thank you. Thank you.
You are an expert on doing amazing things.
I don't know about an expert, but I feel very fortunate because I have a lot of really fantastic artists in my life that I can call upon to support and kind of do that work. And so it worked out really well because the artists involved were so phenomenal. So I'm grateful.
God, I'm like pop. I'm like, I was watching it, watching it. So perfect. It's
Thank you.
exactly what I want to say, you know? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in all
Thank,
different forms of art. I love it.
Thank you. And I think it's interesting, and I don't know about you, but like this being I don't in quarantine and in a pandemic, like I was having so much difficulty like finding the inspiration to like create and to be artistic. And then, I think with what was happening, what is still happening in our country, just around Black lives and Black bodies, I felt like it was disrespectful of me to not use I felt this at first. I felt so paralyzed and like how to navigate that, and I realized it was disrespectful, it was rude for me not to use my voice or do something to talk about these issues. And I'm not good at a lot of things, but I'm good at art. And so
There you
um,
go. You did it beautifully, beautifully. Thank you so much for that.
thank you.
We're
Thank
gonna
you.
talk about it later.
Good.
So let me introduce yourself. First of all, let me thank you for accepting my invitation to this podcast, which is basically, an opportunity to structure communication with creatives in the city and internationally that I admire, that I think are doing something great for the community, or are, innovators, pioneers. And I think you're one of them.
Thank you.
I remember I saw you first at the Overtown Performance Arts Center, and I also was really impressed by that piece that you put together there. Your name is Kunya.
Kunya, yes.
Kunya.
Kunya
What
Rowley.
is your last name?
Rowley.
Oh, okay, Kunya Rowley. All right, now I'm saying it properly because I was Houston, Houston. So you have an organization, right? That is called Huge Songs.
Yes, I have an organization called Hued Songs. Can I talk a little bit about it?
Yes,
Yep.
please. Go ahead.
Uh,
Introduce yourself.
so yes, ma'am. My name is Kunya Rowley, and I have an organization. I'm the artistic director of an organization called Hued Songs, and Hued Songs was formed really to celebrate and explore Black culture through Black history and Black music and Black artists. And I just, for me, kind of growing up and navigating and never really as an artist feeling like I didn't have a place, I think my ultimate goal is to provide a platform where artists can be seen and can be heard. And I think, especially in this day and age, a platform where we can pay artists equitably for the work they're putting out. So everything that we do tries to talk about some intersection of Black culture through music.
Nice. I think it's so great. I think that's what we all should do, provide platforms to support each other.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we have a culture of collaboration in place, especially in
Yep.
places like Miami, which collaboration happens, but it's kind of random, or it's among people who meet each other or know each other, but it's difficult to access those, places when you don't know what the rules of the games are, right? And I think we need to open up,
Yeah.
because and to explode, because there are so many things going on in Miami, so many talent. That is why I was motivated to do this, just to reach out, to
Yeah.
say, hey, how's it going? What's going on with you in these times? We're living in special times,
Yeah. No,
right?
I agree. It's funny. I just started a new position at the Miami Foundation around music access, and that is a problem not just in the music industry and in community organizations, but in just Miami in general. And of course, Miami is fantastic and wonderful, but I think sometimes we are so siloed and we're so disconnected. So like, how do we, to your point, like, how do we create those connections? How do we stay connected? And I think that sometimes what happens is we're all trying to, we're fighting for a piece of the pie. And what we don't realize is that if we work together, the pie doesn't get smaller, it actually gets bigger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have a great, there's a great phrase that a friend of mine always has in his Facebook page, which says something like, there's enough light for everybody to shine, something like
Yeah.
that sense. And I think that is such a nice phrase that I always believe that there's enough space for, we are the universe,
Yeah.
each and every one of us, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think that when you come from another place, it's clear. When you have a mixed background, it's clear when you come to Miami that there's so much still to be done when it comes to the culture of collaboration. The art scenes are kind of disconnected.
Yeah.
And there are certain traditions, and I'm very interested in this, of doing things, which is basically, the same people who are always hanging out on themselves. And then what else?
Yeah.
And people get comfortable just presenting the same people that they know or approach them or their friends. But what about what is going on outside those circles,
Yeah. Well, and I think that, part of the problem is, it's true that very often the same artists, the same organizations, the same group are afforded more opportunities than others. And I think that there are some organizations that struggle to kind of break through, to kind of be seen. And part of the challenge very often, in my opinion, some of those smaller organizations don't have the same infrastructure for the marketing, or some of the artists don't have the same infrastructure, don't have the same capacity. So I think part of also in community building is, where can we provide development opportunities for artists? Where can we provide development opportunities for organizations? Is so like those resources that trickle down, like the big organizations, the well-known artists get those opportunities, and very often it's really hard for artists and other small organizations to access those. So I totally agree. Like, how do we make sure that we're like providing an equitable platform for all organizations, for all artists?
Especially, I think, because as Miamians, right? We know that the city has such a bad reputation, which is I don't care about the past, but I think that in a way shadow everything that is going on right now.
Yeah.
That is kind of a cultural explosion. I don't know if you agree with me, in the last, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Things have diversified so much. You know, people are, I think, cultural communities have been created informally, right?
Yeah.
And formally. But I think, and I'm very happy that you got this position. I hope you will take into consideration, I'm sure you will, these ideas about the need to provide access to people, information. A lot of people that are migrant, how are you supposed to know how things work? You don't have any sort of information or anything. That is something that is missing, for example.
Well, and I think, and this is honestly, I'm excited for the role as well. And I think that it has so many components. So yes, it's like, what are the resources that organizations need? But also, every community is different. So the way that you connect with one community, and the way I would connect with Miami Gardens, is going to be different from how I connect with people in Little Haiti. Is different from how I connect to people in Hialeah. So like, how do we make sure that we're empowering community leaders in those communities? How do we make sure that we're finding out like, what does that community need? Because it's not a one size fits all. Like, it has to be really specific to every community. And so, yeah.
And my thing is that we have to get to know each other, because otherwise then Cubans will be, the Black people, like that, which is the experience, unfortunately, of Miami, know? Unfortunately, we use the Black people to define us against, or as opposed to. And what is that? We are Black people.
Yeah.
We come from Black people,
Yeah.
But we forgot, because it's so easy here in which a community that is a majority white migrant community, then you forget that Afro roots are in your blood. Yeah. So weird. Anyways, tell me a little bit about your story. I would like people to know about you, and I would like to know, When were you born, and why art and specifically singing opera came into your life?
Oh, okay. Okay. Time for a story. Not a long story, but so I am a Miami native. I love Miami. I was not born in Miami though, which hurts me to say. So, because I wish I was born in Miami, but I was born in North Carolina and I was only there for like 3 weeks. And then
Wow.
we made it here. And so
You're a
I,
Miamian. Come on.
I'm a Miamian. So I was raised by my grandmother. So she's from Trinidad, and so she raised both my younger brother and myself. And I think that what is interesting about my grandmother is she was born in Trinidad. She was raised in an orphanage in the Virgin Islands by European nuns, and so for her, she often says that the islands don't have a race issue. She's like, we grew up not talking about race. And so I think that's how my little brother and I were raised. Like we didn't talk about race. For her, it wasn't about being black. It was about just having a good education. I want to make sure that you're in, we didn't have a lot of money, but she wanted to make sure that we were in decent neighborhoods. She worked really hard to make sure that for her, it wasn't about, she really, and she equated doing well with integrating with white children into white schools. And so
Yeah, that's my experience too, kind of. Even though Cuba was really mixed, I have to say, was really mixed, way mixer than
yeah.
here, way mixed.
Well, and so what I realized was we never talked about being black. Obviously, I mean, I'm very clearly I'm black, but we never talked
No,
about
but I
being
understand
black.
what you're saying. Me
Yeah,
neither. Yeah, it
we
was
never talked about
sometimes.
that. Yeah. But what happens then is that all I had, or I think, the only things that I had to go on about what being black was what I saw in the media, what I saw on TV, what I saw in movies. And so I actively believed that being black was inferior, not because of what I was taught.
I totally understand.
That's just what I saw. And so, I think
It's in the right, in the culture, right?
it's in the
It's kind
culture.
of an understanding.
Yes.
Everybody operates. It's a base understanding.
And if you don't have that positive reinforcement in some capacity,
Of course.
how do you combat that?
Absolutely. My family, my father is black, my mom white, my grandma, we used to live with my grandma, my white grandma, and they hate each other. Unfortunately,
I know.
my grandma and my father, they really had a bad time. And they were, my grandma was such a nice person, but she told me that, well, she was raised like that. She thought that being black is something like disgusting kind of.
Yeah.
And she had, thank God, mixed granddaughters. So she realized that that was not the case, but still, she couldn't deal with my father.
Yeah. No.
So,
So fast forward to, college. I went to school for opera. I graduated in 2010. And then, the thing about being, I don't think opera and singing just came like really by accident.
uh-huh.
I learned my first classical song in high school, and then I auditioned for an arts high school and started taking private voice lessons and went to school for opera. And then, I don't know, opera is a very expensive career. So when it's the private voice lessons, the coachings. So I ended up taking a full-time job where I worked for 10 years in sales, but I continued singing. And I
Wow.
think that I started to realize and feel just culturally and ancestrally lost. I just felt like as I navigated this world, as I started to I had learned and become really good at operating in systems that were very white. I had learned and was just comfortable, just kind of quelling who I was as a black person. And I think there came a time where I was like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what's important to me. And so, Huge Songs came about from the Knight Arts Challenge grant by the Knight Foundation. And so I applied for a Night Arts Challenge grant, and this was in 2017, and won the award. And it's really been this exploration. It's very personal for me. Like, yes, I want it to be. It's community building through the arts, but it's been a personal experience for me to kind of understand and navigate who I am as a Black person and what that means to me. And I don't know a lot about my family history and my lineage. I was raised by my grandmother. I've never known my father. My biological mom and I have been, very disconnected. She actually, passed away a couple of months ago. And so I just feel like there's so much about who I am that I didn't know. And I was trying to find it in all the wrong places and finally, so this has been kind of a way for me to kind of connect to who I am. And even though my ancestry began in a country and a continent many miles away, I think more than ever, I feel really connected to learning about it and understanding. So yeah, it's still a journey.
The roads of finding who you are and your relationship with ancestries are so weird. Me, I was never in my family ever. We never had any religious experience, actually, because we were born and raised within the revolution. So supposedly we were supposed to not be religious at all. Or African ancestry practices were forbidden together with Catholicism. So that's, so you are kind of coming from that, but at the same time not related to that. So it was kind of a curse. I remember my sister, she was the first one who started this practice at the house, putting glasses of water, and I would go up after and, take them away. This is how bad it was, how brainwashed I was. It's so crazy when you think about it. In places where Africanness is so common, it has been so much marginalized and repressed, right? That we are, I think, in a way, I feel in these times that I'm kind of touching base back with that.
Yeah. But
and
I think
the ideal conditions, but it is what it is,
Well, it's not ideal, but I think that also part of the problem is there's so much misinformation out there on that. And even for me, I think that when the first concert that I did with Hued Songs, which you came to, it was, I had done a mini concert like a couple of months before, and it was around, there were some spirituals, and someone said, you should really, in your next concert, really delve into like the, where the spiritual came from, like the Negro spiritual. And I think as I started to research and dive in, I thought it would be really disingenuous to just talk about the spiritual starting here in the US. Like, we understand that it was born from enslavement, but we look at the roots, the foundation of like Black spirituals, it is rooted deeply in African culture. Many of the traditions are like, it's still there from, the ring shout and the shout and repeat. So much of it is deeply entrenched in African culture. And so for me, it was just diving into that and understanding, when we diving into West African culture, of the Yoruban culture and Orishas. And I think that there's so much misinformation about that. And I think there's so many people who I think it's really like it's a scary thing. It's a scary path for them to discuss, Orishas and multiple deities. But when I really started to like dive in and like when you strip away really any religion, so much of it is the same. There's so many similarities.
Only different manifestation of the same
Exactly.
need, of the same need that we all have. And I'm so happy that you're talking about this. Me also, I'm in the same process, and I've discovered that we're always talking about West Africa, but we are not talking about Egypt.
Yeah.
Where everything started.
Yeah.
The first civilizations were from the Nile, Mesopotamia, and this area is weirdly considered Middle East. Why? It's Africa.
Yeah. It is, yeah.
North Africa is Africa. And the influence of North Africa in the Spanish culture, in the Portugal culture, etc., in the Mediterranean culture, and also in our cultures. It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
from different places, you know, and we don't talk about that anymore because
Yeah.
we're, as Western subjects, we're so used to stop in Europe for all our references. Don't we question that?
Yeah.
And when you go and look into Buddhism, you see so much of the spirituality of Africa and the connections with that. Of course, we are a society of images. So if we see a movie in which voodoo is represented in a particular way, that's it.
Yeah.
Because we are so much, you know, used to value based on the images that we consume.
Yeah. And I think, and it's true that we, so much of, even in my, like, just like being naive and not understanding and not knowing, there's so many things that we hold on to, whether it's these negative connotations of anything, and that's what we kind of use to kind of
Yeah,
dictate how we view something. And I mean, I think that it's the same with I mean, there's so many things that, like, that if you can hold on to anything that's negative, certainly, like, that's what's going to, like, dictate how you, like, view something. But I think that's been, for me, the most enlightening experience of kind of going down this path, is to, like, understanding and navigating. And I understand that I now know a smidgen of a smidgen, because there's so much information out
exactly.
there.
I feel the
And
same way. The more I study, the less I know.
exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me something else. How was your experience? How has been your experience as an African diasporic Miamian? Let's put
Yeah.
it this way. Can you comment a little bit about it?
Just living in Miami, or just,
I mean, being accepted or integrating with other communities, or you know, looking. What I'm trying to look is
yep.
what it's like feeling being from Miami. You know, in a way, being
Yeah.
from the diasporic subject.
Yeah. You know, I think I feel very fortunate right now in the time that we live in, which I know it sounds very weird. I
No, no,
mean,
I totally understand. I feel the same way.
I think that I feel very fortunate right now in the time that we live in, and just being a Black person. And there's so much turmoil going on. There's so much turmoil just around, just like, Black bodies and Black lives and Black culture. But I think that it's, in a way, it's making us stronger as a community in so many ways.
The historic moment of expansion.
Yeah. But but it's interesting, because when growing up, part of one of the things that, like, I don't think I realized was how disjointed our community is, even just as Black people, and I mean, in general, and from, we're so siloed. So, like, our Haitian community is, I mean, in one
I
area.
know.
I mean, and so I think that, like, one of the things that I think growing up that really stuck with me was how disconnected, even as a people, that I felt, like,
I
really
know.
wholeheartedly. And
And
so I think that,
sometimes we don't understand each other. We have prejudice among each other.
well, and it's true. There's actually there's prejudice within our community.
Absolutely. That
Yeah,
doesn't make us move any forward.
it doesn't
And
make us move. Yeah,
it's exploded, I'm sorry, by some people.
yeah,
Unfortunately.
and it's very, it's caused us to be, and I think it's caused us to be a little bit more, like, far more disconnected than we should be. But I really think that because of the movement that's happening now, it's gotten a little, getting a little better. But I think that there's so many there's so many factors that, like, prohibit us to be, like, really, really unified. From Miami's a very spread out city, and so we have so much. It's so hard to stay connected when we're so spread out. Sure, it's language, sure, but, like, I think that, like, part of where I see a lot of opportunity for us to be stronger is, how do we start to, like, take away those things that really, like, separate us, and yes, like, culturally, to understand there's so much that really binds us as
I
a
think
people.
through arts, through what you do, through what I
Yeah.
do, through education, communication, I think we need to communicate more often because there's so much communalities that we
Yeah,
have as African diasporic or
yeah,
just individuals, you
yeah,
know, that we are so used to live away from each other or be in a distance or not hanging out because you're Black, I am Cuban. What does that mean?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, we
But
enjoy the same things, I bet, when it comes to diversity, you know, arts, good art, and you can tell, you know,
yeah.
in your art. And let me ask you about how do you achieve this level of excellence in your pieces? Because honestly, this is something that I appreciate so much.
So can I tell you something? So I got the Knight Foundation grant in 2017. And so the thing with the Knight Foundation grant is it's a matching grant. So they're like, we're gonna give you this money, but you have to raise the rest of it. And so the first year was very challenging because I've always been an artist, but I've never had to create from scratch.
Mm.
Um, and so I would say it was a really hard year. And what I realized was that part of where I was failing was I was trying to do it on my own.
Mm.
And the moment I started to ask for help, the moment I was happy to say that I can't do this without other people and collaborating, um, things started to come into place. And so I think a couple things. I have a fantastic network of people that I've known, but also now that I've come to know and I've come to that have been really supportive. I also think that sometimes we think that you have to have $1 million to do something really well, but I think that you just have to be really intentional
Mhm.
about how you use your resources. And I think that so often I'm guilty of this. You know, I want to do everything. I want to do this and do this and do this and do this. And then what happens is I just end up doing something really poorly. So I think for me, it's about
Poorly.
poorly.
I
Exactly.
don't believe it.
So for it's about having the right people. I yes, I feel like I'm kind of smart, but there are many people who are much smarter than I am. So how do I get those people? There are many people who are much more talented than I am. How do I create like a network of people that want to work with me and that are excited about this? How
Mhm.
do I make sure that I'm being collaborative? And then how do I make sure that everything I do is intentional and that I'm not trying to spread myself too thin? Because I
Mm.
think very often as people of color, as Black people, I think that we're so afraid that we're not going to have this opportunity again. So for me, I know that I'm like, oh, if I don't take this now, it'll
Uh-huh.
never come again. And so I've had to be good about saying no, I can't do that because I'm not going to be able to do it well. And so I think that it's a learned skill and it's hard because sometimes the opportunity won't come back. But I think it's much better to do a few things just really really well than trying to spread yourself thin. So I'm grateful that I've been able to do some things and a lot of learning, a lot of mistakes, but also a lot of learning.
Let me ask you, how do you see moving forward the arts entertainment in local industry as as a result of the effect of the pandemic, right? The COVID-19.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I just got. Well, this is interesting. I think a couple things are going to have to happen. I think when this when COVID really started, I don't think that anybody anticipated that it would go on for this long. And I think that it really kind of showed us a lot of inadequacies and disproportion in terms of access and resources to a lot of things. I think technology is going to continue to be the future of so much. And so I think that I just was able to get a commissioning grant to do a short film. But a when I applied for the grant, and they're like, okay, great, we're gonna give it to you. I didn't have a camera. I didn't have any lights. I was like, what am I gonna do? I didn't have anything. And so I feel really fortunate because I had, of course, grant funding to be able to buy some of this. But how many artists and organizations don't have that same opportunity? And so I think it's going to require us to do kind of like an asset map. So understanding what artists and organizations really need to be able to do artistic work, understanding and you know, that for so many organizations that were already struggling, already trying to figure out how to navigate, like, you know, getting people in the house, like now so much of that is gone. So how do we how can we create innovative programming using technology? How can we create innovative programming that's site specific and that's
Exactly.
outside?
And it's
But I
so
think
boring because it could be that what happens is that it could be things that could be very boring,
I know, yeah.
online.
And then I think some organizations, some people are even saying, you know, because we're seeing so much digital content that's like, you know, free, because people are just trying to like get, but like also, how do we make sure that's not sustainable? So how do we make sure that we're creating programming that we're able to monetize? So at the end of the day, artists have to make money, organizations have to make money. So we have to start to be also really creative about how we make sure that um, we're our organizations and our artists are also like are funded and resourced.
And I would say
Is
training programs to use the time now to help
yeah,
people train or give access to people, to training, because there's so
yeah,
many people that are training. When it comes, there's so much to learn when it comes to applications, whatever. And a lot of has to do with self-education, but it would be nice, to have
yeah,
some training or some education. And when
yeah,
it comes to racism, I think we need to really have conversations, the uncomfortable conversations within organizations.
yeah.
You
But
know,
you
in
have
order to explore the issues, what people think, because there's a lot of literature and there's a lot of things already in place that are working, that could be lessons learned for other organizations. What do you think?
I agree. You know, I 100% yes, and I agree with you just times 1,000. I think what I want to see is I want to see organizations digging in deeper to do the work. It just can't be a statement. It
Exactly.
can't be performative
Exactly.
because sometimes I think that, and I mean, to be perfectly honest, some of these organizations are rotten from the inside, and so I think
Exactly.
it really requires like some deep introspection and
Introspection.
being uncomfortable, not with just having the conversation, but making the decisions to restructure, reorganize. I mean, cut away the rot. But I think that some organizations aren't quite willing to do that work. I think they're willing to make the statement. They're
Exactly.
willing to bring on a DEI specialist or lead bring on someone to do a training. But it's a little bit deeper and it's a little bit deeper. And I think part of the issue is it takes time. It can't happen overnight. It takes time.
It's so interesting, this issue that you're mentioning about declarations, because
Yeah.
that's the tendency of a lot of people, the Western subject. We do declarations and we think everything's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's the way you express solidarity. Why can't we express solidarity in action?
Yeah.
Because if you just do a declaration saying that I support you, what does that mean? When
Yeah.
you're dealing with your daily challenges
Yeah.
as an Afro-descendant person living in, for example, Miami or
Yeah.
anywhere else, for that
Yeah.
matter.
It's yeah. And here's the thing. I think more than ever, what gives me hope is that community members are pushing back, and I think that's what it's going to take. Is that we can't, myself, my community, we have to be steadfast and understand that we have just as much of an opportunity to help these organizations and to push back, and that change really isn't going to happen unless we're being really also intentional about saying no, that's not enough, no, do more. And so I think that it's also it's on us to push back and to talk about that.
And I think it's interesting to tell people this is not about persecuting white people.
No.
It's not about that. Has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
It's about education on why we are equals.
Yeah.
That Black people are people that deserve the same respect. Black bodies deserve respect, deserve the
Yeah.
same respect. And this is something that is ingrained in our subjectivities.
Yeah.
It's how we operate. We are not aware of it, and people get kind of sometimes uncomfortable because they think that you're blaming them.
Yeah.
It's not about blame. This is not the guilt, inquisition kind of thing. This is a natural movement of awareness.
Yeah. And I think, I think that like the important thing is to understand we all not it's understanding your privilege. Even as a Black man, I have privilege as a man, because I'm a man, I'm able-bodied. As a cisgendered man, so like there's so much even that I privilege that I walk in. And so I think
also have privilege. I understand.
Yes,
that. I understand.
We have to talk about, I mean, so like I think that like it's about acknowledging, it's a lot of introspection. We have to check our own privilege, and it's uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
So I mean, we're gonna make mistakes. I mean mistakes, but you have to be able to like turn it on quickly enough to understand that, and then not to just to see it, but then to actually take some like actionable items to rectify that.
And I think it's important to demystify the violence that is associated with Black bodies in the society, And I think Peace does a beautiful job in that sense.
Thank you. And I think, I was reading this article, thinking about kind of like in the preparation for developing that. It's what does it mean to be in this body that is over sexualized? That is like overly, traumatized. And even in today, right now, when we talk about looking at like Black violence and what we see on TV, we are bombarded with all these videos of Black men being killed, of Black men, and that's almost desensitizing. And so why are we so fixated on, or why are we so desensitized to seeing these types of videos? Because you're not seeing the internet being flooded with videos of white people being killed and traumatized. And so it's true. It's like, how do we make sure that we're also cognizant of how we view Black bodies, of how we view Black death, of how we view Black violence, is I think that so much of it, it's ingrained into how we navigate and how desensitized we are. It's a lot, and it's the media, it's community, it's a lot.
It's a lot because there are a lot of generalizations, and we operate based on a lot of stereotypes.
Yeah.
And you hear people talking all the time about other communities. For example, I always say, Cubans love to talk about Black people in a bad way, but they have never visited a Black neighborhood. So how do they know about Black people? You know what I mean? An example, and I'm kind of, and I'm denouncing it because I am Cuban and I feel kind of, shame that I have heard so many people that are my people talking in that way about other, not only Blacks, also about Central Americans, like India. Yep. And you are like, really? Do we need to go there? Do we really need to go there to define ourselves as superior? Is that how we define ourselves?
Yeah. That's crazy. I think, and you were talking about kind of what it's like to just being this like the African diaspora in Miami, and I think it's also about privilege even within our culture. I mean, I remember growing up that even there was so much in school. There was so much like hatred and discrimination against Haitians. But I think it's always about who am I? Who can I be more powerful over? So how do I ensure I'm not at the bottom of the pecking order? And I think it's totally it's a thing. And that's why we see discrimination within just like within communities. And so, yeah, that totally is.
I wanted to ask you something else. I was really happy to see the hip hop piece within your, I mean, the poetry, you know,
Yeah,
spoken
yeah, yeah.
word. That was so powerful, and I think there's so much to be explored when it comes to, you know, spoken word and hip hop. That for example, I used to live in New York, and I see the difference in the treatment of Black culture and hip hop culture in New York as opposed to here. You know how isolated here it is from
Yep.
us, as opposed to New York. It was part of you, who you are when you are an urban subject.
Yep.
And what do you think about it? What can we do?
Well, I think first of all, when I think about like hip hop and rap, and it's for me, it's very important. Even though my background is in opera and I'm a classical singer, when we think about the breadth of Black music, it's very, very wide. And so I knew that early on it was going to be important for me not to just have classical music, not just have opera in any Hued Songs performances, to be really intentional about like having different genres. I think, but even growing, I mean, I think that I think to your point about there being this negative connotation and this negative view about hip hop and about rap and I think it's like, how do we make sure and provide like new platforms for like this type of genre? How do we dispel some of those myths? And I know that like when hip hop and rap are very much rooted also in like African culture and African rhythm. And so a lot of it's about dispelling some of that, like that ignorance. But I think, how do we make sure, for me, like I'm creating as wide of a platform for other artists and other people to also connect, because not everyone's going to connect to classical music. So how do we make, how do I, I think it's with anything, how do we make sure that we're providing lots of entry points for multiple people and multiple
My
communities?
question, for example, in this regard, has to do with how people who consider themselves writers and poets have not checked hip hop.
Yeah.
Because hip hop is part of the evolution of poetry.
Yeah.
And narratives.
Yeah.
And some people don't even, that teach poetry. I had a friend, we were talking about it, and I was like, do you teach poetry? I mean, hip hop to your students? She's like, no, well, you know about music more, whatever. It's kind of, I see that she has it like a separate thing. It's not part of poetry.
No. And I think it's, again, it's discriminatory, because it's, when we think about rap and hip hop in its essence, it's viewed as something that is very much rooted in Black culture. When we think about, I mean, opera and classical music very often, I apologize,
Okay.
being the pinnacle of music. But when we look at classical music, it is very much European, Anglo,
Totally.
white dominated.
Totally.
And so we, again, I think it's, whether it's inherently biased, but we look at these art forms as lesser than. So, and I think that it's totally, it's, to your point about what we value and what we like prioritize. It's not rap, it's not hip hop, it's not jazz, it's not, all these things that we like are just kind of deprioritized based on.
Because they're Black, they're coming from the Black cultures. And we don't even know why, but unfortunately, and that's the same thing with popular culture. In Cuba, when we talk about popular culture, we're talking about the culture of Black people.
Yeah.
And we marginalize it all the time without saying it. Oh, and that's how people differentiate themselves, against that marginal culture. But yeah, but everybody dance to that. Everybody love, enjoying themselves with the music of Black people, but not hanging out with Black people. That's weird for me.
And you even see this in, I think about in art, when we sometimes see, when we look at the distinction between things that are called fine art versus folk art, And so,
No,
so often what we see in folk art is it's artists of color. It's, I
absolutely.
mean, so, you know, I mean, like why that you know, those
I
distinctions
know.
are always meant, um,
And there are narratives to talk about each of them as separate.
exactly. Yeah, no,
I
yeah,
refuse to see art separate, honestly.
yeah,
And I like to highlight Black art now because I think this is the time to highlight everything that we have been missing.
yeah,
But honestly, it's part of humanity. Humanity.
yeah. I agree.
I think we probably see these things clearly, but I don't know. I would like, to have this conversation with a lot of people that it's difficult. I
Yeah.
can. Not because I don't want to. Some people don't even want to have it. I don't know. What has been your experience with this?
So, you know, it's interesting. I, even as a Black person, it's for the past couple of years, it was really hard for me to navigate having this conversation because it even made me uncomfortable. And so I think I've had
Mm.
to kind of like really force myself. And now, I mean, more than ever, I'm happy and willing. But my mother's a great example. You know, we had having this conversation is even uncomfortable for her. And so I think that we have to,
Mm.
um, I think for her as someone in her 80s and who's just like still struggles to kind of navigate what this is,
Mm.
um, it's been it's challenging. So I'm finding that it's hard that there are some people who are 100% they may be willing, but they don't have all of the information. Is I think there's so much misinformation, and you have to dig through a lot and be willing to not take everything that you read and see at face
Absolutely.
value.
A lot
And
of
I
manipulation trying to present the Black movement as a violent, left-handed communism. I have heard here people saying that Black people that this is communism. Can you imagine
yeah,
what a reductionism?
yeah. And I, you know, I think that I'm also someone who really believes in like the media and their role in this, and not that, and I say that I don't want to sound I'm biased or that I'm
I
bashing the
totally
media,
understand what you're saying.
but I think that the media plays such an important role
Absolutely.
on making sure that they're providing um, unbiased views, that they're being really intentional about like the really like well-sourced information, because I think it's so easy now for people to find really bad, poorly written articles. I think it's so for people to share really like, I mean, just inaccurate information, that it's really the responsibility of our media to like really ensure that everything they're putting out, is factual, is accurate, is well documented and well sourced.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really appreciative that you asked me to talk to you today.
I wish you the best in your new endeavors, and we're here to collaborate. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Please, I'm it's a still a new role for me, and I'm literally, this is I think week 2, but like there's so much to be done, and I'm excited about delving in and connecting more. And this has been awesome. So thank you.
Have a good one.
All right, you as well. Thank you.
Chao, cuídate. Bye.
Bye.